All right, thanks, Celeste. My name is Ian. I'm so glad to be here today. This is my first time at an OpenStreetMap conference, and I really don't consider myself like a sort of participating part of the OpenStreetMap community, which hopefully will change after this presentation. But I am I'll be talking today about the context that I'm coming from, which is a large map library, and how some of the materials and the collections that we have in this library can serve as a really generative and productive starting point for understanding open sourced and crowdsourced data historically. So yeah, let's jump into it. So I'm coming here today from just around the corner. It was a very easy bike ride from the Boston Public Library where I work. Has anyone been to the Boston Public Library before? Nice, so that's a great show of hands. Is anyone here from Boston? Like, are people here locally? Cool, cool. Okay, so it's great to see some local folks. I work at the Leventhal Map and Education Center, which is part of the Boston Public Library. We essentially function as the maps department of the BPL. We're technically an independent nonprofit, but that is what we do. We steward and manage the library's historic and contemporary map collection. Anybody want to guess how many maps we have over at the library? Feel free to just shout out a number. All right, 3,000's going. 5,047? 100,000, all right, this is a big gulf, all right? So we've got a big spread here. Anyone think it's more than 100,000? Yeah, I saw your hand go up way in the back. All right, 300,000. Now, a million. Okay, so this is always fun because nobody really knows. Like, it starts at 3,000, could be a million. We have about 250,000 maps in our collection. So not quite a million, that would be very cool, but I think it's still a sizable, a considerable collection. It spans the entire globe in scope and dates back to the late 15th century temporally. And the best part about the maps in our collections is that they are yours. They belong to you, members of the public. Anytime you want to come visit the Map Center, explore our maps, you are welcome to do so. It's quite a bit easier if you live here, but if you're planning to visit and you do want to see some things from the collections, you're more than welcome to make a research appointment with us. It is a research grade, research caliber map collection and library in general. It's the third largest public map collection in the US. This is where we are, right around the corner. So please swing by. Our collections are both physical and digital. At this point, we've been digitizing maps for a couple decades. And we, as part of our charge to steward the map collections in the library, we are constantly exhibiting the maps in different thematic shows and exhibitions. Our current show is called Terrains of Independence. If you drop by the center to visit us, you will see it up actively on display. I would be remiss if I didn't also plug our previous exhibition, which I curated with my colleague Emily Bowe, called Processing Place, which is about the history of computer cartography, largely between the 1960s and the 2000s. Might be of interest to folks in this room. All of these exhibitions are preserved in amber, as it were, online, so we have really nice digital reproductions of them that even after the physical one goes away, these are still here. You can always check these out. The maps in our collections often look like this. This is a whale chart by Matthew Fontaine Maury from the mid-19th century. It's mentioned in Moby Dick, which is a fun chapter called The Chart. We've got this 20th century sort of a famous data visualization that uses these graduated dots to show income and housing and population density in the Boston area. We have beautiful bird's eye views, right, that show sort of the qualitative information about historical places as they might have been seen, quote unquote, from above, right? Or views of the landscape in triplicate, right? We have these different scales represented here about how the built environment and parks in Boston have changed over time. So many regional maps, but they're not strictly to New England. This is a map in our collections of slavery in the United States in the mid-19th century. This is actually one of the first choropleth maps, if not the first choropleth map, which is a map that shows quantity by area. So this technique of representation was actually developed to show and represent processes of enslavement in the US. This is a map by W.E.B. Du Bois that shows a very fine-grained, granular approach to the sociology of Philadelphia and the geography of Philadelphia's 7th Ward. And finally, we have some maps that engage with color and cartographic representation in what I think are really exciting ways. This map on your left here is concrete socialism shown in red, right? It's just public spaces in New York City, but sort of shown in this like Red Scare format to provoke people to think a little bit about what you might mean when you say socialism, right? Same with this map on your right by the Hungarian cartographer Paul Teleki, who is using red to show these really interesting sort of density representations of ethnicity in post-World War I Hungary. And then my favorite, I won't ramble too much about this, but this is a map of the real estate conference in the US in 1926. Some fascinating stuff in here. All of that is to say we have tons of really engaging maps in our collections that contain lots of important historical geospatial information. And the most rich, in my opinion, maps like this are in urban atlases, which you can see in these big books on the right-hand side of the screen. This is what those maps look like. They're bulky, massive objects. They're quite heavy to lift. But when you can flip into them, you see page by page granular representation of city blocks that were developed and maintained year over year, usually by fire insurance agencies or tax assessment purposes. So those two institutions were responsible for, or they needed, right, these surveying agencies to make these maps that represent buildings and property ownership and building material in cities. We've digitized hundreds and hundreds of these maps. They start looking like that book. They go onto a very fancy digitizing table in the basement of the Boston Public Library. And eventually they come out looking like this on our digital collections portal. Now that is still not an ideal way, I think, to explore and research with these maps, paging through page by page in our digital collections portal. You start here, you might end up looking at something like this, right? This is geographic information, but it's not spatial data by any stretch. So how can we go from that to spatial data? Well, folks in this room are probably familiar with processes like georeferencing, which allow you to take map images that have been scanned and then overlay them in a coordinate system that matches the Earth. And we've done that in Boston, in the greater Boston area with a tool called Atlascope. Just out of curiosity, has anyone explored this tool before? Jeff, I see your hand going up. Sweet, a couple people in the back. Amazing. This is a tool that we built to easily interface with and explore historic urban atlases. Atlascope.org. I am just going to show it to you. You did, amazing. So maybe some folks saw Jeff's overview. So this is what we're working with here. It is really a discovery interface, a discovery portal for looking at these urban atlases, fully georeferenced by some wonderful, wonderful interns that we sort of have a rotating cast of down at the Leventhal Center. You can view these maps, and I'll zoom in even more just to make sure that people can really see it, right? We've got very granular data about who owns these buildings at 1902 is the year that we're looking at right here. We can change the base layer so that we're comparing, for example, historic maps to historic maps. And you can see how, right, well, in this case, we've got this school building that sort of gets expanded between 1890 and 1902. You can probably start to puzzle out where I'm going with this kind of question, right? That using these maps, turning them into spatial data, provides a really useful starting point for creating historical change over time data sets at a very fine-grained, very granular level. I'll also just say that we have coverage in this tool outside of Boston, so you can scan, let's set the base map back to, could do satellite imagery, generously given to us by MassGIS. you can zoom all the way out and kind of scan up the North Shore, going from Revere up to Lynn, up to Winthrop, Salem, Marblehead, all the way up to Beverly, I think we have. So the atlases are fully mosaicked, and this is all totally open source information. Open source data, you can use these data sets in your own geographic information systems, workflows, and projects. So back to the slideshow. There's also a search tool in there. So if you want to search for an address, you can do that. So there was a really funny exchange on Blue Sky a couple of weeks ago. And maybe you talked about this as well in your presentation, Jeff, but I thought this was great. A local cartographer named Andy Woodruff, who's done a lot of great work in digital mapping in general over the past decade or two, but has also worked specifically, hey Andy, has also worked specifically with us at the Map Center, posted on Blue Sky, I'll be so angry if I learn that someone already digitized building footprints in Boston's former West End, because even doing it fairly sloppily, which I thought it looks pretty good, took me a lot longer than expected. A work in progress on the insane urban renewal that razed the entire neighborhood. And indeed, if you go to the West End today, you'll find a landscape that looks very, very different than it did in the 1940s or 50s. Urban renewal processes totally transformed this downtown area in Boston, along with highway construction projects that make it feel, and really is a totally different place than it was in the mid-20th century. Open Historical Map, project by Jeff Meyer, responded to this post asking if you have any plans for the data, right? Open Historical Map is a great project, fork of OpenStreetMap. Again, many of you are probably familiar with this, that allows people to edit and update, change over time, historical geospatial data in the same crowdsourced fashion that OpenStreetMap has done for years and years and years. Andy, did you use AtlasScope or those, the XYZ tiles that we, sweet, yeah. So it's just a nice example of how these map collections at places like BPL, but not necessarily BPL, right? Like this is sort of a call for map libraries and map collections more broadly to be treated with this sort of intention and curiosity by people doing this sort of public-facing crowdsourcing work. Because they contain so much rich information, and many of them are digitized. And I think we're sort of living through a period where libraries, National Endowment for the Humanities, the Institute for Museum and Library Services, have faced a lot of pretty devastating cuts. So libraries and map collections need public support now urgently, as much as they ever have, right? I won't say more than ever, but it's definitely a high billing item. As I wrap up here, I just want to gesture towards some stuff outside of this like very historical range, right? We often say at the Map Center that it's easier to find maps from 1780 in our collections than it is to find maps from 1980. That was part of our project in Processing Place, which was, is an ongoing collecting initiative to develop our collections in early GIS and computer cartography maps. We've been doing this for a few years now. And in addition to those fancy maps from the 18th century and the 19th century, we now have a lot of maps that look like this, right? Maps that were made with GIS tools and early ArcInfo software, or this, or this, or this, right? All of these maps capture really important spatial data sets that represent a moment in time that is not always easy to sort of pull out of the ether, right? Spatial data sets that you can get from Boston's Open Data Portal, for instance, do not track closely change over time in zoning, for instance. These things are updated with a frequency that doesn't get saved or snapshotted. So these maps provide a really critical look into how landscapes and how features have changed in the last 40 years, which is just an important, just as important a component of Open Historical Map, for example, as anything from 1780 or 1880. Last thing I'll say is that we have been totally slammed by AI scraping and bots in our digital collections for the past like year and a half that takes our collections offline regularly. And so in this moment of sort of proliferating artificial intelligence. It's very invigorating and exciting to see so many people who are doing the manual handcraft of digitizing points and sort of that spirit of crowdsourced spatial data work gather together this year. So thanks for letting me speak. I think I am at time.